Hello there, and welcome to this soothing bedtime story exploring some of the most brutal and thankless professions in the mighty Roman Empire. I'm so glad you've joined me tonight for this journey into the blood-soaked arenas and shadowy training grounds, where ordinary men shaped warriors for death and glory. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Before we begin our descent into the world of sand, sweat, and steel, I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from and what time of day it is for you right now. Are you nestled in bed as the evening light fades through your window? Perhaps you're winding down after a long day, seeking the gentle embrace of a story to carry you into peaceful slumber. Feel free to leave a comment and let me know. And if you enjoy these meandering, tranquil tales that explore the darker corners of history, please consider subscribing for more soothing excursions into the past. Now, make yourself comfortable, pull that soft blanket up to your chin, and let your mind drift back through the centuries with me. Tonight, we're travelling to the heart of the Roman Empire, to a time when the roar of crowds echoed through massive amphitheaters, and the clash of gladius against shield determined who would live to see another sunrise. Picture yourself settling deeper into your pillow as we journey back nearly 2,000 years to around 80 AD, when the mighty Colosseum had just opened its doors to the bloodthirsty masses of Rome. The air is thick with anticipation, and the metallic scent of sand mixed with something far more ominous. In this world of marble columns and brutal spectacle, where emperors commanded the loyalty of millions and citizens lived for bread and circuses, there existed a profession that few would envy and fewer still would choose. While the gladiators themselves have captured our modern imagination with their courage and tragic fates, tonight we'll meet the men who shaped these warriors of the arena. The gladiator trainers, known as magistri, who lived in the shadows of glory, bearing the impossible burden of preparing men to die well for the entertainment of others. These were the unsung architects of Rome's most savage entertainment, men who walked the razor's edge between life and death every single day. Take a deep, calming breath, and allow your shoulders to relax as I tell you about a world where your success was measured not in gold or glory, but in how well your students could bleed and die in front of thousands of screaming spectators. Where every day brought the possibility of watching men you'd trained and mentored fall beneath the blade of an opponent, their final moments playing out on blood-soaked sand while crowds cheered for more. You might wonder why anyone would choose such a path. Why a man would dedicate his life to an occupation that promised heartbreak, financial uncertainty, and the constant spectre of violence. As you sink a little deeper into your comfortable bed, far removed from the brutal realities of ancient Rome, consider this. For many of these trainers, choice was a luxury they'd never possessed. In the sprawling empire that stretched from the misty hills of Britannia to the sun-baked deserts of Africa, opportunities for advancement were scarce for those born into the lower classes. The gladiator schools, or ludi, offered one of the few paths where a man might elevate his station through skill and cunning, rather than birth or wealth. But this opportunity came at a price that would haunt every trainer until his dying day. Tonight, we'll follow several of these forgotten men as they navigate the treacherous world of the gladiatorial schools. We'll meet Gaius Brutidius, a former legionnaire whose war wounds ended his military career and forced him into the arena as a trainer of new recruits. We'll discover the story of Marcus Flavius, a freedman who clawed his way up from slavery to become the master of an entire gladiator school, only to find that success brought its own unique torments. And we'll witness the daily struggles of Lucius Cassius, a young trainer barely past his 20th year, who must learn to steel his heart against the inevitable losses while maintaining the facade of strength that his students desperately need to see. As you feel your breathing naturally slow and your muscles begin to relax, prepare yourself for tales of men who lived in a world where death was entertainment, where human life was currency, and where the line between teacher and executioner blurred beyond recognition. These were not evil men, but ordinary souls caught in an extraordinary and brutal system, doing their best to survive and perhaps find some measure of meaning in the darkness. Let the gentle rhythm of your heartbeat guide you deeper into this ancient world, where the scent of olive oil mixed with the metallic tang of weapons, where the sounds of training echoed through stone corridors, and where every sunrise brought the possibility that this might be the day you'd watch another of your gladiators take their final breath. We have a long journey ahead of us tonight, through the hidden corners of Rome's most famous spectacle, so there's no need to rush. Allow your eyelids to grow heavy as we prepare to explore what it truly meant to shape warriors for the arena, and why being a gladiator trainer was perhaps one of the most psychologically devastating professions in all of human history. Close your eyes if you haven't already, and let us begin this gentle descent into the shadows of the Colosseum, where ordinary men performed extraordinary acts of brutality in service to the Empire's endless hunger for blood and glory. The morning mist clings to the 7 hills of Rome as the first rays of sunlight pierce through the narrow windows of the Ludus Magnus, the great gladiatorial school that stands in the shadow of the mighty Colosseum. It's the year 82 AD, and Emperor Domitian's reign has brought an insatiable appetite for ever more spectacular and deadly games to entertain the masses. Take a slow, deep breath, and let yourself drift back to this ancient world, where the air carries the mingled scents of burning incense from nearby temples, fresh bread from the bakeries, and something far less pleasant, the metallic tang of blood and sweat that seems to seep from the very stones of the arena district. Picture the narrow cobblestone streets already bustling with activity in the pre-dawn hours. Slaves hurry past carrying amphorae of wine and oil, their sandaled feet creating a gentle rhythm against the worn stones. Merchants set up their stalls in the growing light, hawking everything from exotic spices brought from the furthest reaches of the empire to crude clay figurines of famous gladiators. The sound of hammering rings out from the blacksmith shops where the instruments of arena combat are forged and sharpened. Allow your body to sink deeper into your comfortable bed as we step through the heavy wooden doors of the Ludus Magnus. The building itself is a marvel of Roman engineering, a massive rectangular structure built around a central training arena that mirrors the Colosseum in miniature. 3 stories of cells and training rooms rise around this sandy courtyard, connected by a network of underground tunnels that lead directly to the great amphitheater next door. The walls are thick limestone blocks, chosen not just for their durability, but for their ability to muffle the sounds that echo within, the clash of wooden practice swords, the grunts of exertion from training men, and occasionally the screams of those whose practice sessions have gone terribly wrong. Flickering oil lamps cast dancing shadows along the corridors, their warm light a stark contrast to the cold reality of what happens within these walls. Feel your breathing naturally slow as we explore this world where death is not just a possibility, but a profession. In the cells that line the upper floors, gladiators from across the known world sleep on simple straw pallets. Gauls with their fierce blue tattoos, Germanic tribesmen with braided hair and scars from a dozen battles, Nubians whose dark skin bears the ritual markings of their homeland, and former Roman citizens who have fallen so far from grace that the arena represents their only hope of redemption. But it's not the gladiators themselves we're here to observe tonight. Instead, let your mind focus on the men who shape these warriors, the trainers who must transform frightened slaves, desperate criminals, and captured enemies into fighters capable of entertaining the bloodthirsty crowds of Rome. The life of a gladiator trainer in Imperial Rome is one of impossible contradictions. These men must be skilled enough in combat to teach others, yet diplomatic enough to navigate the complex politics of the arena. They must be hardened enough to send men to their deaths, yet caring enough to inspire loyalty and courage in their students. They must be business-minded enough to protect their investments, yet emotionally detached enough to profit from human suffering. Let the gentle rhythm of your heartbeat guide you deeper into relaxation as we consider the weight that rests on these trainers' shoulders. Each morning, they wake knowing that some of the men they'll train today will be dead before the month is out. Every lesson they teach in swordplay or defensive techniques might be the difference between life and death for a student facing a veteran gladiator in the arena. The Roman crowd is merciless in its judgment. A trainer whose gladiators consistently disappoint, who die too quickly or show cowardice in the face of death, will find his reputation ruined and his livelihood destroyed. But a trainer whose students die with honour, who provide the spectacle the crowds crave, might find himself wealthy beyond his wildest dreams, yet haunted by the ghosts of every man he's helped prepare for slaughter. As you feel your muscles naturally relaxing and your mind growing peaceful, imagine the sounds that would greet our ears in the early morning hours of the Ludus. The soft scrape of sandals on stone as trainers make their way to the central arena. The quiet murmur of prayers to various gods, Mars for strength in battle, Fortuna for luck, and sometimes whispered pleas to Dispater, god of the underworld, asking for mercy for those who will soon cross into his realm. The training grounds themselves tell a story of organised brutality. Wooden posts wrapped in straw stand like silent sentinels, their surfaces scarred by thousands of practice strikes. Racks of training weapons line the walls, wooden swords weighted with lead to build strength, blunted spears for formation work, and an array of nets, tridents, and other specialised equipment for different fighting styles. But perhaps most telling are the stains in the sand, dark patches that no amount of raking can completely remove, silent testimony to the countless training accidents and the rare occasions when practice has turned deadly. The trainers know these stains intimately, can point to each one and tell you the story of the man whose blood created it. Allow your eyelids to grow heavy as we prepare to meet the first of our trainers, men who have chosen or been forced into this most challenging of professions. In this world of marble and blood, of glory and despair, they represent something uniquely Roman, the ability to find order and purpose even in the most brutal circumstances. Take one more deep, cleansing breath and let yourself settle completely into comfort and relaxation. Our journey into the shadowy world of the gladiator trainers is about to begin in earnest, and we'll need all our empathy and understanding to comprehend the impossible choices these men faced every single day. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The heavy wooden doors of the armory creak open as Gaius Brutidius steps into the dim morning light, his weathered hands already reaching for the familiar weight of his training gladius. At 43 years old, his body bears the testament of 2 decades spent in Rome's legions, a deep scar running from his left temple to his jaw where a Germanic spear had nearly claimed his life, and a pronounced limp from the shattered leg that had ended his military career 5 years ago. Allow yourself to settle deeper into comfort as we follow Gaius through his morning ritual. The former centurion moves with the deliberate precision of a man who has learned that preparation can mean the difference between life and death. He checks each training weapon with the same methodical care he once used to inspect his soldiers' equipment before battle, running his fingers along wooden edges to feel for splinters that might cut a student's hand, testing the balance of practice spears to ensure they won't throw off a gladiator's timing in actual combat. Gaius had never intended to become a trainer of their arena fighters. In the orderly world of the legions he had found purpose and meaning, rising through the ranks to command a century of 80 men who trusted him with their lives. He had dreamed of retiring to a small farm in the countryside, perhaps taking a wife and raising sons who might follow in his footsteps. But the Germanic wars had shattered those dreams along with his leg, leaving him pensioned off with a modest sum that wouldn't sustain the life he had envisioned. Feel your breathing naturally slow as you imagine the weight of Gaius's circumstances. The gladiatorial schools had offered him the only path to maintain his dignity and purpose. His military experience made him valuable. He knew how to train men for combat, how to instill discipline and courage, how to prepare soldiers for the possibility of death. The transition from training legionnaires to training gladiators had seemed, at first, like a natural progression. But Gaius had quickly discovered the fundamental difference between his old profession and his new one. In the legions he had trained men to survive battle, to return home to their families with honour and their lives intact. Here in the ludus, he was training men to die beautifully, to provide spectacle for the masses even as their blood soaked into the arena sand. This morning, like every morning for the past 5 years, Gaius makes his way to the central training ground where his newest group of recruits awaits. They stand in ragged formation, 12 men who have found themselves in this gladiatorial school through various misfortunes. There's Quintus, a former baker who accumulated debts he couldn't pay, and sold himself into gladiatorial service to clear his family's obligations. Beside him stands Thraex, a captured Thracian warrior whose proud bearing cannot quite hide the desperation in his eyes. At the end of the line, young Davos shifts nervously. Barely 18, condemned to the arena for theft when hunger drove him to steal bread from a patrician's kitchen. Let your muscles relax completely as we observe Gaius beginning the day's training. His voice carries the authority of decades of command as he addresses his students, but those who look closely can see the slight tremor in his hands that has developed over the past year. Each of these men represents both hope and heartbreak. Hope that Gaius can give them the skills to survive their first few fights, and perhaps earn their freedom, heartbreak, because he knows that statistics are mercilessly against them. The morning session begins with basic conditioning, exercises designed to build the strength and endurance that might buy a gladiator an extra few seconds in combat. Gaius demonstrates each movement himself, his scarred body moving with surprising grace despite his injuries. He learned long ago that his students needed to see that their trainer had faced death and emerged, even if diminished. As they work through sword drills against wooden posts, he corrects their form with the patience of a man who understands that each improvement might mean the difference between a quick death and a heroic one. But it's during the weapons training that the true weight of Gaius's position becomes apparent. As he watches Quintus struggle with the basic footwork of gladius combat, he finds himself calculating odds with the cold precision of a veteran. Quintus lacks the natural athleticism and killer instinct that separates survivors from victims in the arena. His form is improving, but slowly, and in 3 weeks he'll face his first opponent, likely a veteran fighter hungry for an easy victory to boost his own standing. Breathe deeply and allow yourself to sink further into relaxation as we explore the impossible calculations that consume Gaius's thoughts. Should he request that Quintus be given more time to train, knowing that the Lanista, the owner of the gladiatorial school, values profit over the lives of individual fighters? Should he recommend that Quintus be matched against another inexperienced opponent, potentially dooming some other trainer's student to face a more dangerous adversary? These are the moral mathematics that have begun to erode Gaius's sleep and appetite over the years. The afternoon brings individual instruction, and Gaius works closely with Thraex, who shows the most promise among the new recruits. The Thracian's natural aggression and battlefield experience make him a likely survivor, but Gaius knows that survival in the arena requires more than skill with weapons. A gladiator must understand how to read the crowd, how to play to their emotions, how to make his potential death into theatre that will earn him mercy, or at least respect. As the sun begins its descent toward the western hills, casting long shadows across the training ground, Gaius dismisses his students and retreats to his small quarters. The room is sparse, a narrow bed, a table, a single chair, and a shrine to Mars that he tends with religious devotion. On the wall hangs his old centurion's medallion, a reminder of the time when his purpose was clear and his conscience clean. Tonight, like most nights, Gaius will sit at his table and update his records, noting each student's progress, their strengths and weaknesses, their chances of survival. But increasingly, he finds himself writing something else in the margins of these reports. Prayers. Short appeals to the gods to grant his students courage, to ensure they die with honour if they cannot live with freedom, to forgive him for his role in their fates. Feel your eyelids growing heavy as we consider the profound isolation of Gaius's position. He cannot afford to become too attached to his students, yet he cannot train them effectively without caring about their progress. He serves a system that demands human sacrifice for entertainment, yet he strives to give each man the best possible chance at survival. He's respected by his peers and valued by his employers, yet he goes to sleep each night haunted by the faces of former students who fell beneath the blade of more skilled opponents. As darkness settles over the ludus and the sounds of the great city beyond its walls begin to fade into the gentle murmur of night, Gaius Brutidius closes his eyes and prepares for another night of dreams filled with sand and blood and the echoing roar of crowds calling for death. Tomorrow will bring new lessons in the art of dying well, and he will meet that challenge with the same grim professionalism that has defined his life since the day his military career ended and his real suffering began. While Gaius Brutidius tends to his new recruits with the methodical care of a former soldier, across the sprawling complex of training grounds and living quarters, another man faces a very different set of challenges in the world of gladiatorial instruction. Marcus Flavius Aurelius stands before a polished bronze mirror in his private chambers, adjusting the folds of his finest toga as he prepares for what may be the most important meeting of his career. Let your body settle deeper into comfort as we shift our attention to this second trainer, whose path to the gladiatorial schools could not have been more different from Gaius's military background. Marcus, now 35 years old, bears no battle scars on his olive-skinned frame, no limp from ancient wounds. Instead, his hands are soft from years of counting coins and negotiating contracts, his voice cultured from education that most men of his original station could never have dreamed of receiving. take a slow, peaceful breath and allow yourself to drift back 15 years, to when Marcus was known simply as Flavius, a household slave in the villa of Senator Lucius Crassus Maximus. Born to Greek parents who had been captured during one of Rome's eastern campaigns, Marcus had grown up speaking multiple languages and displaying a quick mind that his master had decided to cultivate rather than waste in menial labour. The senator had invested in Marcus's education, training him to manage accounts, negotiate with merchants, and handle the complex financial dealings that kept a wealthy Roman household functioning smoothly. For 12 years, Marcus had served faithfully, earning privileges and respect that elevated him far above the common slaves who worked the fields and cleaned the chambers. He had even been permitted to accumulate a modest savings of his own, the peculium that might eventually purchase his freedom. Feel your muscles naturally relaxing as we explore the twist of fate that changed Marcus's destiny forever. Senator Crassus had been an enthusiastic patron of the games, maintaining his own private gladiatorial school as both an investment and a source of entertainment for his political allies. When the previous Lanista died unexpectedly of fever, the senator found himself in need of someone who could manage the complex business of training and maintaining gladiators while also handling the financial aspects of the operation. Marcus's combination of education, business acumen, and absolute dependence on his master's goodwill made him the perfect candidate. The senator granted him his freedom and appointed him as the new Lanista, with the understanding that his success or failure would determine not just his own fate, but the fate of the entire gladiatorial enterprise that bore the family name. The irony was not lost on Marcus. His freedom had come at the price of becoming responsible for the lives and deaths of other men who had lost their own liberty. As a freedman, he now possessed legal rights and social status that placed him above common citizens. Yet his livelihood depended entirely on his ability to produce compelling death matches for the entertainment of the Roman populace. Allow your breathing to slow as we observe Marcus preparing for today's crucial meeting with Gaius Cornelius Maximus, a wealthy equestrian who is considering purchasing 6 gladiators for a private celebration of his son's coming of age. Such sales represent the most lucrative aspect of the gladiatorial business, far more profitable than the regular arena matches where gladiators might survive to fight another day. Marcus reviews his inventory with the cold calculation of a merchant evaluating livestock. He has 8 seasoned fighters available for sale, men who have survived multiple arena appearances and proven their ability to provide spectacle. There's Brutus the Gaul, a massive man whose berserker fighting style has earned him 7 victories and a devoted following among arena fans. Beside his name on the ledger, Marcus has noted, "Excellent for grand finale, dramatic death preferred" in his neat script. Then there's Castor, a former Roman citizen who was enslaved for debt and has fought his way to 12 victories through sheer tactical brilliance. His fighting style is more cerebral, less visually exciting than Brutus's wild charges, but he has a gift for making his eventual defeat look heroic rather than pathetic. Marcus has calculated that Castor might last another year in regular arena matches, but selling him now to Gaius Cornelius would yield immediate profit and spare Marcus the eventual heartbreak of watching this intelligent man's inevitable decline. Let yourself sink deeper into relaxation as we consider the elaborate deception that Marcus must maintain. To the buyers, he presents himself as a successful businessman who happens to deal in human combat rather than pottery or grain. He speaks eloquently about investment opportunities and entertainment value, using euphemisms that distance both seller and buyer from the reality that they are negotiating the purchase of human beings for the express purpose of watching them die. To his gladiators, Marcus must project the image of a benevolent master who cares about their welfare and their chances of earning freedom through victory. He provides them with better food and medical care than most slaves receive, not out of kindness, but because well-maintained gladiators perform better and live longer. Yet he must also maintain enough emotional distance to make the business decisions that will inevitably send some of them to their deaths. The most challenging aspect of Marcus's position is managing the complex web of relationships that surrounds the gladiatorial business. He must cultivate friendships with arena officials who determine match schedules and opponent pairings. He must maintain connections with trainers from rival schools, sometimes collaborating and sometimes competing for the most lucrative contracts. He must navigate the political currents of Roman society, ensuring that his gladiators reflect well on their former master's family name. Today's meeting will test all of these skills. Gaius Cornelius is known for his extravagant tastes and his desire to outdo his social rivals in the magnificence of his entertainments. He has specifically requested gladiators who can provide memorable deaths for his guests, which means that Marcus must recommend fighters who are skilled enough to put on a good show, but not so skilled that they might survive the private games. Feel your eyelids growing heavy as we follow Marcus through his final preparations. He has selected 3 pairs of gladiators for the demonstration, each pairing carefully chosen to showcase different fighting styles and death scenarios. The first pair consists of a net fighter and a heavily armoured circuiter, whose contrasting equipment will create visual drama as speed battles strength. The second features 2 swordsmen, whose equal skill levels promise a longer, more suspenseful fight. The third pair includes Brutus the Gaul, whose reputation alone will impress the buyer. As Marcus makes his way toward the private arena where the demonstration will take place, he carries with him detailed scrolls describing each gladiator's history, fighting record, and estimated entertainment value. He has rehearsed his presentation countless times, perfecting the balance between businesslike professionalism and subtle emotional manipulation that will convince Gaius Cornelius to pay premium prices for premium deaths. The afternoon sun casts long shadows across the training grounds as Marcus approaches his destination, knowing that by evening he will have either secured enough profit to maintain his school for another season or face the possibility of financial ruin that could reduce him once again to slavery. In this world where freedom itself can be bought and sold, even the freest man is only as secure as his last successful transaction in human misery. In the deepest shadows of the ludus, where torchlight barely penetrates the stone corridors and the air hangs thick with the metallic scent of blood and fear, Lucius Valerius Maximus crouches beside a dying man. The gladiator's name was Sergius, a Dacian warrior who had fought with the fierce pride of his mountain people for 8 months before meeting his match against a veteran retiarius whose net had found its mark with deadly precision. Allow your breathing to deepen as we enter this most harrowing aspect of a trainer's existence. Lucius, known throughout the gladiatorial world as Mortis, Death's Shadow, earned his reputation not for his ability to teach men how to kill, but for his uncanny skill at preparing gladiators for the moment when death becomes inevitable. At 28 years old, he possesses neither Gaius's military experience nor Marcus's business acumen. Instead, Lucius has mastered the darkest art in all of Rome's brutal entertainment industry, teaching men how to die with honour. Feel your body naturally relaxing into your comfortable position as we explore how a Roman citizen of respectable birth came to specialise in such a macabre profession. Lucius was born into a family of modest means in the Subura district, where his father worked as a scribe for a minor magistrate. Unlike many who found themselves in the gladiatorial schools through misfortune or desperation, Lucius had chosen this path with the cold calculation of a man who recognised where his particular talents lay. As a child, Lucius had displayed an unusual fascination with death that both disturbed and intrigued those around him. While other boys played at being soldiers or merchants, young Lucius would spend hours observing the final moments of injured animals, studying the way their eyes changed as life departed, learning to recognise the exact instant when struggle transformed into acceptance. His parents had initially hoped he might become a physician, but Lucius showed no interest in healing, only in understanding the transition from life to death. Let your muscles release all tension as we follow Lucius through his first encounter with the gladiatorial world. At 17, he had attended the games celebrating Emperor Domitian's victory in Dacia, watching with scholarly intensity as gladiator after gladiator met their end on the blood-soaked sand. But while the crowd roared its approval for the spectacle, Lucius found himself analysing something else entirely: the vast difference between those who died well and those who died poorly. Some gladiators faced death with dignity, maintaining their composure even as their strength failed, earning the respect of the crowd through their final moments of courage. Others collapsed into panic and desperation, begging for mercy that would never come, dying in ways that left the audience feeling cheated and unsatisfied. Lucius realised that this difference was not merely a matter of personal character, it was a skill that could be taught, refined, and perfected. Take a slow, peaceful breath as we observe Lucius beginning his unconventional apprenticeship. He approached the lanista of the ludus dissecus the following morning, offering his services not as a combat instructor, but as a specialist in what he called final preparation. The concept was revolutionary. While other trainers focused on keeping their gladiators alive as long as possible, Lucius would prepare them for the inevitable moment when survival became impossible. The gladiatorial schools quickly discovered that Lucius's training produced fighters who commanded higher prices and greater audience satisfaction. A gladiator trained by Mortis might still die in his first match, but he would die in a way that honoured both himself and his school, earning posthumous fame that reflected well on his trainers and owners. More importantly, these well-prepared deaths often resulted in the crowd granting mercy to the victor, creating a reputation for honour that increased the value of all gladiators from that particular ludus. Lucius's methods were unlike anything practiced by conventional trainers. He would spend hours with condemned gladiators, teaching them meditation techniques borrowed from Eastern philosophy, breathing exercises designed to maintain calm in the face of mortal terror, and mental preparations for accepting death without losing dignity. He studied the crowd psychology of the arena, understanding exactly what gestures and expressions would transform a defeat into a heroic tragedy worthy of epic poetry. Feel your eyelids growing heavier as we witness Lucius's most challenging case. 3 months ago, a gladiator named Aurelius had been sentenced to death by wild beasts for the crime of attempting to escape from his school. This represented the most shameful form of execution in the arena, not a combat between skilled warriors, but a simple feeding of condemned men to hungry lions. Yet even in this hopeless situation, Lucius had worked tirelessly to prepare Aurelius for a death that might salvage some measure of honour. For weeks, Lucius had trained Aurelius in the art of facing death without weapons or armour, teaching him how to stand with dignity before charging beasts, how to meet the lion's attack with gestures that would appear courageous rather than desperate to the watching crowd. He had rehearsed with Aurelius the exact words to shout before the attack, phrases that would transform his execution into a defiant statement against tyranny rather than a cringing plea for mercy. When the day arrived, Aurelius walked into the arena with his head held high, spoke the words Lucius had taught him with clear, carrying voice, and faced the released lions with such composure that the crowd, moved by his dignity, had chanted for his reprieve until Emperor Domitian himself granted clemency. Aurelius lived, but more importantly for Lucius's reputation, he had demonstrated that even the most hopeless situation could be transformed through proper preparation. Allow yourself to sink deeper into relaxation as we return to the present moment, where Lucius kneels beside the dying Sergius in the medical chamber beneath the arena. The Dacian warrior had fought valiantly, but been mortally wounded by a trident through the chest. As life slowly ebbs from Sergius's body, Lucius speaks to him in the soft, measured tones he has perfected over years of such vigils, guiding the dying man through his final moments with the same care other trainers devote to sword techniques. "You fought with the courage of your ancestors," Lucius murmurs, his hand resting gently on Sergius's shoulder. "The crowd saw your valour. Your name will be remembered in the songs they sing tonight in the taverns. You have earned your place in the Hall of Heroes." These are not empty comforts, but carefully crafted truths designed to ease the transition from life to death, to ensure that Sergius's final thoughts are of honour rather than failure. As the torch flames flicker and dance on the stone walls, casting shifting shadows that seem to reach toward the dying gladiator, like the fingers of the underworld gods, Lucius continues his quiet vigil. This is the moment that defines his profession, not the training sessions or the strategic planning, but these intimate encounters with death itself. These final services he provides to men who have given their lives for the entertainment of others. When Sergius's breathing finally stills, and his eyes fix in the unseeing stare of death, Lucius performs the last ritual of his profession. He closes the dead man's eyes, places a coin on his tongue for Charon's ferry, and whispers a prayer to Dispater asking that the underworld gods welcome this warrior with the honour he deserves. Tomorrow there will be other gladiators to train, other deaths to prepare for, other final vigils to maintain. But tonight, in the quiet darkness beneath the great arena, Lucius Valerius Maximus sits alone with the cost of his expertise, surrounded by the eternal silence of those he has helped to die well. Far from the underground chambers where Lucius maintains his solemn vigils, in a cramped workshop that reeks of leather oil and metal polish, Titus Flavianus hunches over a wooden workbench, his gnarled fingers working to repair a damaged gladiator helmet. The bronze has been dented by what must have been a tremendous blow, and dried blood still clings to the leather padding inside. This helmet belonged to Cassius the Bold, who wore it proudly through 19 victories before a younger, faster opponent found the gap between neckguard and shoulder plate. Allow your body to settle into complete comfort as we meet this fourth trainer, whose specialization represents perhaps the most psychologically demanding aspect of gladiatorial instruction. Titus, now 57 years old, serves as the school's Doctor Mortuum, literally teacher of the dead. While other trainers work with living gladiators preparing for future battles, Titus's responsibility is far more complex and infinitely more heartbreaking. He trains the wounded, the crippled, and the condemned. Feel your breathing naturally slow as we explore how a man comes to dedicate his life to working with those whom the arena has already marked for death. Titus had once been a gladiator himself, though that was 30 years ago when his body was strong and his reflexes quick. He had earned his freedom through 8 years of combat, accumulating enough victories to purchase his liberty and enough scars to remind him daily of the price he had paid for it. Most freed gladiators chose to leave the world of the arena behind them, using their hard-won freedom to start new lives as far from sand and blood as possible. But Titus had discovered that he could not abandon the men who still fought where he had once bled. He returned to the Ludus as a trainer, initially working with promising young fighters, teaching them the techniques that had kept him alive through dozens of combats. However, fate had gradually drawn him toward a different calling. Titus possessed an unusual gift for communicating with men who had lost hope, an ability to reach gladiators whom others had written off as finished. Word of his talent spread throughout the gladiatorial community, and eventually he found himself specializing in cases that other trainers avoided. The rehabilitation of fighters whose bodies or spirits had been broken by the arena's demands. Let your muscles release all tension as we observe Titus's current workshop, which serves as both armory and hospital, repair shop and counseling chamber. Along one wall hang dozens of damaged pieces of gladiatorial equipment, each item telling the story of a defeat, an injury, or a death. Titus knows the history of every dent and bloodstain, can recite the names of the men who wore each piece, and describe the circumstances that brought the equipment to his care. On a low table near the window lie the tools of his dual trade, leatherworking implements for repairing armour alongside surgical instruments for tending wounds that will never fully heal. Titus has become skilled in both crafts out of necessity, learning to mend both the physical and psychological damage that the arena inflicts on those who serve it. Today, his most challenging case awaits him in the corner of the workshop. Marcus Antonius, once known as the Thunderbolt of Gaul for his lightning-fast sword work, sits motionless on a simple wooden stool, staring at his right hand with the vacant expression of a man who no longer recognizes himself. 3 weeks ago, a circuses shield rim had crushed the bones in Marcus's sword hand so thoroughly that the Ludus physician had recommended amputation. The hand was saved, but it will never again grip a gladius with the strength and precision that had made Marcus famous throughout the empire. Feel your eyelids growing heavier as we witness Titus beginning his careful work with the broken champion. Unlike the other trainers we have met, Titus's methods involve neither physical conditioning nor combat instruction. Instead, he practices a form of healing that Roman medicine barely recognizes, the restoration of a warrior's will to continue living when his ability to fight has been destroyed. The hand moves, Titus observes quietly, settling onto a stool across from Marcus. I can see the fingers flex. The bones have knitted well. His voice carries no false optimism, no attempt to minimize the magnitude of Marcus's loss. Titus learned long ago that hope built on lies crumbles quickly, while hope built on honest assessment of remaining possibilities can endure even the harshest realities. Marcus's response is barely a whisper. A gladiator without sword skill is just meat for the arena. I am already dead. My body simply hasn't realized it yet. These words echo similar phrases that Titus has heard from dozens of other fighters, whose careers ended not in glorious death, but in the slower agony of gradual irrelevance. The challenge facing Titus is more complex than simple physical rehabilitation. In Roman society, a gladiator's identity is completely bound up in his fighting ability. To lose that skill is to lose not just livelihood, but the very core of selfhood. Marcus had spent 12 years building his reputation and his sense of worth around his supernatural speed with a blade. Now he must somehow construct a new identity from the ruins of the old one, or face the psychological death that often precedes physical suicide among broken gladiators. Allow yourself to drift deeper into relaxation as we observe Titus's careful psychological work. He begins by acknowledging the full extent of Marcus's loss, refusing to offer platitudes about different ways to serve, or new chapters beginning. Instead, he guides Marcus through a methodical inventory of everything the injury has taken away, the possibility of continued arena success, the dream of earning enough victories to purchase a comfortable retirement, the identity as an elite warrior that had sustained him through years of mortal peril. Only after this honest accounting of loss does Titus begin the more delicate work of helping Marcus identify what remains. Your mind retains every lesson you learned in 12 years of combat, he notes. Your eyes can still read an opponent's movements better than men who have fought for 20 years. Your understanding of arena tactics remains unmatched. These observations are not attempts at consolation, but strategic assessments of assets that might be rebuilt into a new form of value. The process Titus uses has been developed through decades of working with gladiators whose fighting days have ended through injury, age, or psychological trauma. He knows that the transition from active fighter to trainer, advisor, or school administrator requires more than simply accepting new responsibilities. It demands a fundamental reconstruction of identity, a psychological death, and rebirth that can be more challenging than any physical wound. As the afternoon light slants through the workshop's small windows, casting long shadows across the cluttered space, Titus continues his patient work with Marcus. He speaks of other fighters who have successfully made similar transitions, describing how former gladiators have found meaning and purpose in roles that utilize their hard-won wisdom without requiring them to risk their lives in combat. But Titus also knows that not every broken gladiator can be saved. Some men are so thoroughly defined by their combat prowess that they cannot survive its loss. Others carry psychological wounds that run too deep for healing, trauma accumulated over years of facing death that finally overwhelms their capacity for continued functioning. Part of Titus's expertise lies in recognizing which men can be guided toward new lives and which are beyond salvation. Tonight, as shadows lengthen and the sounds of active training fade from the corridors outside, Titus will remain in his workshop, continuing the slow, careful work of helping Marcus Antonius discover whether he possesses the strength to become someone new. It is perhaps the most demanding form of training in all the gladiatorial schools, not preparing men for death, but teaching them how to continue living when the life they knew has ended. Take a moment now to breathe deeply and let your body sink even further into the comfort of your bed, feeling the soft embrace of your pillow cradling your head as we pause in our journey through the shadowed world of Roman gladiator trainers. We have travelled far together tonight, walking through the blood-stained corridors of the great ludus, witnessing the impossible burdens carried by men who shaped warriors for death and glory. Allow your muscles to release any remaining tension as you reflect on the four souls we have encountered in these halls of training and tragedy. Each man represents a different facet of a profession that demanded everything from those who practiced it, yet offered little in return beyond the hollow satisfaction of duty performed and the weight of countless memories that could never be shared with those who had not walked these particular shadows. Feel your breathing naturally slow and deepen as we consider Gaius Brutidius, the former centurion whose military precision and rigid discipline could not protect him from the gradual erosion of his conscience. Every morning, he rises to face the impossible mathematics of survival, calculating odds and probabilities while trying to maintain the emotional distance necessary to function in a world where his students' deaths are not failures, but inevitable outcomes to be managed and optimized. Let your eyelids grow heavy as you think of Marcus Flavius Aurelius, the freedman whose intelligence and business acumen elevated him from slavery to ownership, yet trapped him in an enterprise built upon human suffering. His success is measured not in lives saved, but in deaths made profitable, his freedom purchased through the careful management of other men's bondage. The ledgers he maintains tell stories written in blood and coin, each entry representing both financial opportunity and moral compromise. Drift deeper into relaxation as we remember Lucius Valerius Maximus, called Mortis, whose mastery of death's final lessons made him both revered and feared throughout the gladiatorial community. His gift for teaching men to die with dignity represents perhaps the most profound skill in all of Roman society, yet it is a talent that isolates him from normal human connection. How does one form friendships when one's expertise lies in preparing others for their final breath? How does one find joy in life when one's professional focus remains fixed on life's ending? Allow yourself to settle completely into comfort as you contemplate Titus Flavianus, the broken healer who tends to those whom the arena has discarded. His workshop serves as a way station between the world of active combat and whatever comes after, whether that be a new life built from the ruins of the old, or the slow descent into despair that claims those who cannot survive the death of their fighting selves. His work requires him to hold hope for men who have lost all hope for themselves, to believe in the possibility of renewal while surrounded by evidence of irreparable damage. These 4 men, each following his own path through the labyrinth of gladiatorial training, represent thousands of others whose names have been lost to history, but whose struggles echo across the centuries. They remind us that even in a system designed to celebrate death and violence, human compassion and dignity could still flourish, albeit in forms twisted by the demands of their harsh profession. Feel your heartbeat naturally slow as you consider the broader context of their lives. Rome in the 1st century. AD was a society of stunning contradictions, where architectural marvels rose beside institutions of systematic brutality, where legal codes protecting citizens coexisted with the casual disposal of human life for entertainment. The gladiatorial games themselves embodied these contradictions. They were religious rituals honoring the dead, political spectacles demonstrating imperial power, and commercial enterprises generating enormous profits from carefully choreographed suffering. Let your breathing become even more peaceful as we acknowledge the complexity of judging these men by our modern standards. They lived in a world where slavery was an accepted foundation of economic life, where public execution served as both justice and entertainment, where the value of human life was determined by social class and legal status rather than inherent dignity. Yet within these constraints, they found ways to preserve their humanity, to care for their students and colleagues, to maintain honour in circumstances that offered little opportunity for honourable action. Allow your mind to drift as you imagine the weight of accumulated memory that each trainer carried. Gaius remembers every student who fell in the arena, can recall their names and fighting styles, their hopes and fears. Marcus maintains detailed records of every transaction, but beneath the clinical language of his ledgers lie the stories of men whose lives he bought and sold. Lucius has guided hundreds through their final moments, has whispered comfort to the dying and prayers for the dead. Titus has watched former champions reduced to broken shadows of themselves, has witnessed the slow death of hope in men who once commanded the cheers of thousands. Feel yourself sinking deeper into relaxation as you recognize that these memories, multiplied across dozens of trainers and hundreds of gladiatorial schools throughout the empire, represent a vast archive of human suffering that existed primarily to satisfy Rome's appetite for spectacular death. Yet within this suffering, bonds of loyalty and affection formed between trainers and students. Moments of genuine care occurred in the midst of systematic brutality, and men found ways to preserve their essential humanity despite the dehumanizing nature of their work. The gentle rhythm of your breathing can now carry you into an even deeper state of rest as we prepare to continue our exploration of this world. We have met the architects of death, the managers of suffering, the guides to the underworld, and the healers of the broken. But our journey is not yet complete. There are other stories to tell, other corners of the gladiatorial world to explore, other men whose lives were shaped by Rome's hunger for blood and spectacle. Let your body become completely relaxed as you prepare for the second half of our journey together. We will delve deeper into the daily realities of these trainers' lives, witness the personal costs of their professional choices, and explore the ways in which they found meaning and purpose within a system that seemed designed to drain both meaning and purpose from human existence. Take one more deep, cleansing breath and allow yourself to rest in the knowledge that you are safe and comfortable, far removed from the harsh realities of ancient Rome's training grounds, the sand and blood, the clash of weapons and the roar of crowds, the weight of impossible choices and the burden of unavoidable guilt. All of these exist now only in story, in the gentle words that carry you toward peaceful sleep while honouring the memory of men who face challenges we can barely imagine. Rest now in this moment of tranquil reflection, knowing that when we continue our journey, we will do so with greater understanding of the human cost of Rome's greatest spectacle and deeper appreciation for the complex moral landscape navigated by those who served its demands. The pre-dawn darkness still clings to the marble columns of the Forum Romanum when Quintus Didius Falco makes his way through the empty streets, his worn leather satchel containing documents that could determine the fate of 3 gladiatorial schools and the hundreds of men who depend on them for survival. Unlike the trainers we have met within the confines of the ludus, Quintus operates in the treacherous political waters that surround the gladiatorial industry, serving as what Romans euphemistically call a games coordinator, the man responsible for navigating the complex web of bribes, favours and political alliances that determine which schools prosper and which face ruin. Allow your body to settle into deeper comfort as we explore this 5th profession, one that exists in the shadows between the training grounds and the marble halls of power. Quintus, now 41 years old, bears none of the physical scars that mark the men who work directly with gladiators. His hands are soft from handling scrolls rather than weapons, his toga immaculately clean and perfectly draped to project the image of respectability that his profession demands. Yet the lines around his eyes and the premature grey in his hair speak to stresses that are no less real for being invisible. Feel your breathing naturally slow as we delve into the origins of Quintus's unusual career. Born into the equestrian class, he had been destined for a conventional political career, perhaps a position in the provincial administration, or a comfortable sinecure managing tax collection in one of Rome's quieter territories. But a scandal involving his father's financial dealings had left the family's reputation tarnished and their political connections severed, forcing young Quintus to seek opportunities in the grey areas of Roman society, where damaged reputations mattered less than practical skills. The gladiatorial industry had offered him a chance to rebuild his fortune and perhaps his family's standing, but at a cost that became clearer with each passing year. Quintus discovered that his role required him to become fluent in a language of moral compromise that would have horrified his younger self. He learned to speak casually of entertainment budgets that included line items for the purchase of condemned criminals, to negotiate performance contracts that specified the minimum number of deaths required to satisfy paying audiences. Let your muscles release all tension as we observe Quintus preparing for today's most crucial meeting. Senator Gaius Fabricius Lucinus has summoned him to discuss the games planned for the dedication of a new temple to Jupiter Optimus Maximus. The senator's reputation for parsimony is legendary throughout Rome, but his political position requires him to sponsor spectacles that will enhance his standing with both the emperor and the common people. Quintus must somehow convince this notoriously tight-fisted politician to spend enough money to ensure spectacular games while maintaining the delicate fiction that they are discussing religious observance rather than blood sport. The leather satchel at Quintus's side contains a carefully prepared proposal that represents weeks of negotiation with various gladiatorial schools. He has arranged for a program that will feature exotic animal hunts in the morning, followed by public executions of condemned criminals, and culminating in gladiatorial combats between fighters specifically chosen for their ability to provide dramatic deaths. Every element has been calculated to maximize crowd satisfaction while staying within the senator's budget constraints. Feel your eyelids growing heavier as we explore the moral gymnastics that Quintus must perform to maintain his sanity while conducting such business. He has developed an elaborate system of mental compartmentalization, referring to gladiators as performers and deaths as conclusions to performances. When meeting with politicians, he emphasizes the religious and civic benefits of the games, their role in honoring the gods, maintaining public order, and demonstrating Roman superiority over foreign enemies. When dealing with school owners, he speaks the blunt language of commerce, discussing the market value of different types of deaths and the profit margins associated with various forms of spectacle. The complexity of Quintus's position becomes apparent when we consider the range of relationships he must maintain. He serves as liaison between gladiatorial schools and their wealthy patrons, translating the crude realities of arena combat into the refined language that upper-class Romans prefer to hear. He must cultivate friendships with arena officials who can influence scheduling and matchmaking, while also maintaining connections with the criminal justice system that provides condemned prisoners for execution spectacles. Allow yourself to drift deeper into relaxation as we witness one of the most challenging aspects of Quintus's work, managing the expectations of politicians who want maximum spectacle for minimum cost. Senator Fabricius, like many of his colleagues, demands games that will impress his peers and satisfy the masses while spending as little as possible from his personal fortune. This requires Quintus to perform a delicate balancing act, finding ways to stretch limited budgets while ensuring that the resulting spectacles do not disappoint audiences who have grown accustomed to increasingly elaborate entertainments. The morning's meeting takes place in the senator's private study, a room lined with Greek sculptures and Egyptian artifacts that speak to both his wealth and his cultivated tastes. Quintus spreads his scrolls across a marble table, pointing to detailed breakdowns of costs and projected audience satisfaction ratings. He speaks with the smooth confidence of a man who has learned to present human tragedy as entertainment value, describing the fighting records and death styles of various gladiators as if discussing the merits of different theatrical performances. The Thracian pair fighting in the afternoon program has generated considerable audience anticipation, Quintus explains, his voice betraying no hint of the fact that he is discussing two men who will likely be dead before sunset. Their previous encounters have demonstrated excellent dramatic timing, with neither fighter showing tendency toward premature collapse or unseemly begging for mercy. Such language allows both men to discuss the purchase of human lives without explicitly acknowledging what they are doing. Feel your breathing becoming even more peaceful as we observe the senator's response to Quintus's presentation. Fabricius nods approvingly at the cost projections while asking detailed questions about crowd control measures and contingency plans for weather delays. Neither man acknowledges the fundamental absurdity of their conversation. Two educated Roman citizens calmly planning the deaths of dozens of human beings as if organizing a dinner party or commissioning a piece of public sculpture. Yet beneath this veneer of civilized discussion, Quintus carries the accumulated weight of hundreds of such conversations, thousands of lives reduced to budget line items, and the gradual erosion of whatever moral sensibilities he once possessed. He has learned to sleep at night by focusing on the practical necessity of his work. The gladiatorial industry exists with or without his participation, and his role simply ensures that it operates more efficiently and profitably than it might otherwise. As the meeting concludes, and Quintus gathers his scrolls, he exchanges pleasantries with the senator about mutual acquaintances and upcoming social events. Both men have successfully completed another business transaction, while maintaining the comfortable illusion that they are respectable citizens engaged in legitimate public service. Tomorrow, Quintus will visit the gladiatorial schools to inform them which of their fighters have been selected for death, and the trainers will begin the final preparations that will transform living men into afternoon entertainment for thousands of Roman spectators. In the fetid depths beneath the Colosseum, where the very air seems thick with the accumulated screams of 10,000 deaths, a figure moves through darkness so complete that even the rats scurry away from her approach. Claudia Secunda, known throughout Rome's gladiatorial underworld simply as the Bone Mother, tends to a duty so revolting, so fundamentally at odds with Roman sensibilities about femininity and respectability, that her very existence challenges everything the empire claims to believe about proper social order. Allow your body to sink deeper into complete relaxation as we encounter this most shocking of all gladiatorial professions. Unlike the trainers we have met who work with living men, Claudia's expertise lies in the management of the dead, not the honoured dead who receive proper burial rites and memorial inscriptions, but the anonymous corpses that accumulate daily in Rome's insatiable hunger for blood sport. At 52 years old, she has spent the last 15 years in service to death itself, becoming the empire's most skilled practitioner of an art that no respectable Roman citizen would acknowledge exists. Feel your breathing naturally slow as we explore how a woman of free birth came to occupy a position that places her simultaneously below slaves in social standing, yet above many citizens in practical importance. Claudia was born into a family of undertakers who served the poorest districts of Rome, where proper funeral rites were luxuries that few could afford. From childhood, she had been surrounded by death in its least glamorous forms: bodies of plague victims, abandoned infants, the anonymous urban poor who died in alleyways and were discovered only when the smell became unbearable. When her father and brothers perished in the great fire that swept through the Subura district during Emperor Nero's reign, Claudia found herself alone with specialized knowledge that no one else possessed and no one else wanted. The gladiatorial schools needed someone who could manage the disposal of bodies that accumulated too rapidly for conventional burial practices, someone who could work efficiently and discreetly with the physical remains of men whose deaths had entertained thousands, but whose corpses represented only inconvenient disposal problems. Let your muscles release all tension as we witness Claudia beginning her nightly rounds through the underground chambers that few Romans know exist. Armed with oil lamps that cast wavering shadows on stone walls streaked with decades of blood stains, she makes her way through a labyrinth of corridors that connect to every major amphitheater in the city. Her equipment consists of items that would horrify respectable society: bone saws for dismemberment, strong ropes for dragging heavy loads, and leather aprons that can be scrubbed clean of the evidence of her work. The scale of Claudia's operation reflects the sheer volume of death that Rome's entertainment industry produces. On busy days, when the games feature large-scale beast hunts or mass executions of condemned criminals, she might process 30 or more bodies before dawn. Each corpse presents unique challenges. Some are intact but drained of blood, others have been mauled by wild animals beyond recognition, still others have been dismembered by exotic forms of execution designed to thrill audiences with their creativity. Feel your eyelids growing heavier as we observe Claudia's methodical approach to work that would drive most people to madness. She's developed an almost supernatural ability to detach herself emotionally from the human remains she handles, viewing each body as a technical problem to be solved rather than the remnant of a person who once possessed hopes, fears, and dreams. This psychological armour is essential for survival in her profession, yet it has gradually isolated her from all normal human connection. The Roman legal system provides no official recognition of Claudia's role, which exists in a grey area between legitimate business and criminal enterprise. Technically, the improper disposal of human remains violates numerous religious laws and civic regulations, yet the gladiatorial industry could not function without her services, and city officials prefer to maintain plausible ignorance about how the inconvenient problem of accumulating corpses gets resolved. Allow yourself to drift deeper into relaxation as we explore the complex network of relationships that sustains Claudia's operation. She maintains contacts with boat owners who transport bodies down the Tiber under cover of darkness, depositing them in marshlands outside the city where scavenging animals will complete the disposal process. She has arrangements with certain physicians who pay premium prices for fresh corpses to use in anatomical studies that the law technically forbids. Most importantly, she has cultivated protection from corrupt officials who ensure that her activities remain invisible to those who might object on moral or religious grounds. The most disturbing aspect of Claudia's work lies not in the disposal of gladiator corpses, which at least died in what Romans consider honourable combat, but in her handling of the condemned criminals executed during the morning programmes of public games. These men and women, many guilty of nothing more than theft or debt, are subjected to elaborate forms of execution designed purely for audience entertainment. Their deaths serve no purpose beyond spectacle, and their remains carry the additional stigma of judicial punishment that makes even a regular burial impossible. Tonight, Claudia faces one of her most challenging assignments. The Emperor has ordered special games to celebrate his recent military victories, featuring exotic executions that will leave behind remains in conditions that defy conventional disposal methods. She has received advance payment for handling casualties from what the program describes as mythological reenactments, condemned prisoners dressed as legendary figures and killed in ways that mirror their mythological deaths. Feel your breathing becoming even more peaceful as we witness Claudia preparing for this grim task. She sharpens her tools with the same care that gladiator trainers devote to weapons maintenance, knowing that efficiency in her work minimizes both the time she must spend with the corpses and the risk of discovery by those who prefer not to acknowledge her existence. Her movements are economical and practiced, reflecting years of experience in work that must be completed quickly and invisibly. The psychological toll of Claudia's profession manifests in ways that she herself probably does not fully understand. She has lost the ability to form normal relationships with living people, finding their concerns about everyday problems trivial compared to the ultimate reality of death that surrounds her constantly. She speaks to no one about her work, maintains no friendships, participates in no social activities that might reveal the nature of her employment. Yet Claudia has also developed a form of professional pride that sustains her through the darkest aspects of her calling. She takes satisfaction in performing efficiently a task that society demands but refuses to acknowledge. She has become expert in treating human remains with more respect and dignity than they received in their final moments of life, ensuring that even the most degraded victims of arena entertainment receive some measure of care in death, even if that care remains forever anonymous. As the first hints of dawn begin to lighten the eastern sky above the great amphitheater, Claudia completes her preparations and begins the work that will occupy her until the next sunset. In the world above, thousands of Romans will soon begin their daily activities, many of them planning to attend the afternoon games without ever considering what happens to the bodies that will accumulate for their entertainment. Below, in the darkness that protects their willful ignorance, the Bone Mother begins another day of service to an empire that depends absolutely on work it pretends does not exist. As the years accumulated like sand in an hourglass, each of our trainers found their lives shaped by the relentless demands of their profession in ways they could never have anticipated when they first entered the shadowed world of the gladiatorial schools. Tonight, as you settle deeper into comfort and allow your breathing to slow naturally, we return to follow these men and women through the longer arcs of their careers, witnessing how the daily exposure to violence and death gradually transformed them into something both more and less than what they had been. Let your muscles completely relax as we rejoin Gaius Brutidius 3 years after we first encountered him training his recruits. The former centurion now walks with a more pronounced limp, not from his old war wound but from a training accident that occurred when he threw himself between a panicking gladiator and a deadly blade meant for a younger student. The scar on his forearm serves as a permanent reminder of the moment when his protective instincts overcame his professional detachment, nearly costing him his life to save that of Davos, the young thief who had trembled during his first weapons lesson. Feel your eyelids growing heavier as we observe how this incident changed Gaius fundamentally. Davos had not only survived his first arena appearance, but had gone on to earn 6 victories, becoming one of the school's most promising fighters. Yet instead of feeling pride in his student's success, Gaius found himself consumed by a different emotion entirely: terror. The better Davos became, the more valuable he grew to the school's owners, and the more likely he was to be matched against increasingly dangerous opponents until he eventually faced someone who would end his remarkable run. The psychological burden of watching his student succeed had become almost unbearable for Gaius. Success in the arena was ultimately just a postponement of death, a temporary stay of execution that made the eventual fall even more painful to witness. He had begun to hope that his weaker students would lose quickly and cleanly in their first matches, sparing themselves and him the prolonged agony of watching potential, slowly crushed by inevitable reality. On the night when Davos finally fell, brought down by a veteran Retiarius whose net found its mark after a 40-minute battle that had the crowd on its feet, Gaius had been present in the arena, watching from the trainer's section as his most successful student bled out on the sand. The young man's eyes had found his in those final moments, and Gaius had seen not accusation or fear, but gratitude. Davos understood that his trainer had given him the skills to die as a warrior rather than a victim, and his final expression had been one of appreciation for that gift. Allow yourself to drift deeper into relaxation as we witness how this experience drove Gaius to a decision that shocked his colleagues throughout the Ludus. The morning after Davos's funeral, a modest ceremony attended only by fellow gladiators and trainers, Gaius had requested a meeting with Marcus Flavius Aurelius to discuss a fundamental change in his role within the school. "I can no longer train fighters for the arena," he had announced, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "But I can teach them other skills: how to maintain equipment, how to assist with training, how to serve the school in ways that might preserve their lives." It was an unprecedented request, but Marcus had recognized both the sincerity of Gaius's plea and the practical value of his proposal. The school needed support staff, and gladiators who could contribute in non-combat roles represented valuable investments that need not be risked in the arena. Feel your breathing becoming even more peaceful as we turn to Marcus himself, whose journey over the past 3 years had taken him in a very different direction. The freedman's business acumen had proven so exceptional that he now managed not just his original school, but had acquired partial ownership in 2 additional ludi, making him one of the most powerful figures in Rome's gladiatorial industry. Yet this success had come at a cost that Marcus was only beginning to understand. The ledgers that had once contained the names and fighting records of individual gladiators now dealt in much larger numbers, hundreds of fighters whose identities had been reduced to categories and statistics. Marcus found himself making decisions about the lives and deaths of men he had never met, whose faces he would never see, whose stories would never reach his ears. The wealth and status that his success had brought him provided access to Rome's highest social circles, yet Marcus discovered that his prosperity felt hollow when built upon such foundations. At dinner parties hosted by senators and wealthy merchants, he would listen to conversations about art, philosophy and politics, while knowing that his contribution to the evening's entertainment budget came from calculating the market value of human suffering. Let your muscles release all remaining tension, as we observe how Marcus had begun to use his influence to implement small acts of mercy that his colleagues would have considered commercially insane. He had established a fund that provided modest pensions for gladiators who survived to earn their freedom, ensuring they would not face starvation in their post-arena years. He had quietly arranged for the best medical care available to injured fighters, sometimes spending more on healing than their market value would justify. Most significantly, Marcus had begun to manipulate matchmaking in subtle ways that increased his fighters' survival chances, without obviously interfering with the entertainment value of the combats. He had learned to read the crowd's preferences so precisely that he could arrange matches that satisfied their bloodlust, while maximizing the possibility that both combatants might survive to fight again. It was a delicate game that required him to balance profit, politics, and his increasingly troubled conscience. Our third figure, Lucius Valerius Maximus, had found his reputation as a teacher of death spreading far beyond the confines of his original ludus. Wealthy Romans now paid premium prices to have their condemned slaves trained by Mortis before public executions, ensuring that their deaths would reflect well on their owner's dignity and status. This expansion of his practice had made him financially comfortable, but had also multiplied the psychological burden he carried. Allow yourself to sink deeper into comfort as we witness the toll that years of guiding men through their final moments had taken on Lucius. He had developed a form of chronic insomnia that no physician could treat, spending his nights walking the empty corridors of the ludus or sitting in vigil beside men who would die the following day. Sleep, when it came at all, brought dreams filled with the faces of those he had helped to pass peacefully into death, their expressions of gratitude mingling with his growing sense of isolation from the world of the living. Yet Lucius had also discovered something unexpected in his years of service, a profound spiritual dimension to his work that traditional Roman religion could not adequately address. He had begun to study the mystery cults that promised understanding of death's deeper meanings, particularly the worship of Mithras, whose initiates learned to face death without fear through elaborate ritual preparations that paralleled his own secular teachings. Feel your eyelids growing heavier still as we return to Titus Flavianus, whose workshop had evolved into something approaching a primitive form of psychological rehabilitation centre. Word of his success in helping broken gladiators reconstruct their identities had spread throughout the gladiatorial community, and he now received referrals from schools across the empire. Former fighters who might once have been abandoned to suicide or madness now found their way to his workshop, where patient conversation and carefully structured tasks helped them discover new purposes for lives that had seemed to end with their fighting careers. The irony of Titus's position had not escaped him. He had become Rome's most successful healer of gladiators by teaching them to accept that their gladiatorial selves had died. His workshop now served as a bridge between the world of the arena and whatever lay beyond it, helping men cross from one identity to another without losing their essential humanity in the process. As the night deepens around us and your body settles into complete relaxation, these extended glimpses into our characters' evolving lives reveal how even the most brutal professions could not entirely extinguish the human capacity for growth, adaptation, and moral development. Each had found ways to preserve something essential within themselves, while serving a system that seemed designed to destroy such preservation. As your body rests in complete comfort and your breathing finds its natural, peaceful rhythm, let us step back from the individual stories of our trainers to contemplate the vast machinery of empire that their labours helped to sustain. The gladiatorial system that consumed their lives and shaped their souls was far more than mere entertainment. It was a crucial component of Roman imperial strategy, a carefully orchestrated institution that served political, religious, and social functions essential to maintaining control over the largest empire the ancient world had ever seen. Feel your muscles naturally relaxing as we explore how the work of men like Gaius, Marcus, Lucius, and Titus contributed to Rome's ability to govern 60 million people spread across 3 continents. The games they made possible served as a vast pressure release valve for the frustrations and tensions that inevitably arose in a society built upon such massive inequality and systematic oppression. When the urban poor of Rome watched condemned criminals torn apart by wild beasts, they experienced a vicarious satisfaction that temporarily dulled their awareness of their own poverty and powerlessness. Allow your eyelids to grow heavy as we consider the psychological function that gladiatorial combat served for Roman audiences. The arena provided a controlled environment where citizens could witness and celebrate violence without experiencing its consequences, where the random brutality of life could be transformed into meaningful spectacle through the imposition of rules, rituals, and narrative structures. The trainers who prepared gladiators for death were thus serving as priests of a secular religion that worshipped power, courage, and the Roman capacity to impose order even upon chaos and mortality. The economic impact of the gladiatorial industry extended far beyond the profits earned by school owners and trainers. The games supported entire networks of craftsmen who manufactured weapons and armor, architects who designed amphitheaters, merchants who supplied exotic animals and condemned criminals, physicians who treated wounded fighters, and countless other specialized professions that existed solely to serve Rome's appetite for organized violence. Marcus Flavius Aurelius and his fellow Lanisti were not simply managing entertainment businesses, but anchoring vast economic ecosystems that provided employment for thousands of citizens and slaves. Let your breathing deepen as we examine the religious significance that Romans attached to gladiatorial combat. The games had originated as funeral rites, designed to honor the dead by providing them with blood offerings that would ease their passage to the underworld. By the time of our story, this religious dimension had evolved into a complex theology that justified massive human sacrifice through elaborate mythological frameworks. The trainers who taught gladiators to die well were thus serving not merely commercial interests but participating in sacred rituals that Romans believed were necessary to maintain the favor of their gods. The political functions of the gladiatorial system were perhaps even more crucial to imperial stability than its economic or religious roles. The games provided ambitious politicians with opportunities to demonstrate their wealth, generosity, and commitment to public welfare, while also offering the emperor means of maintaining his connection to the common people of Rome. When citizens gathered in the Colosseum to watch gladiators die, they participated in a collective affirmation of Roman values and imperial authority that transcended class divisions and regional differences. Feel yourself sinking deeper into relaxation as we consider how the trainers' work contributed to Rome's military effectiveness. The gladiatorial schools served as laboratories for developing and testing combat techniques that could be adapted for use by legionary soldiers. The weapons training, physical conditioning, and psychological preparation that trainers provided to gladiators directly enhanced the empire's capacity to wage war against its enemies. Veterans like Gaius Brutidius were thus continuing their military service in a different form, using their expertise to strengthen Roman martial culture even after their active duty had ended. The gladiatorial system also functioned as a mechanism for managing social mobility within the empire. Successful gladiators could earn fame, wealth, and even freedom through their arena performances, providing a path to advancement that was theoretically available to slaves and condemned criminals who had no other hope of improving their circumstances. The trainers who made such advancement possible were thus serving as gatekeepers for one of the few meritocratic institutions in Roman society, where success depended upon skill and courage rather than birth or political connections. Allow your mind to drift as we explore the cultural significance of the gladiatorial games in shaping Roman identity and values. The arena served as a theatre where fundamental questions about life, death, honour, and human nature were explored through carefully staged dramas of combat and sacrifice. When audiences watched gladiators choose death over surrender, they participated in collective meditations on the nature of courage and the proper relationship between individual will and social duty. The trainers who prepared these performances were thus functioning as philosophers and artists, creating meaningful experiences that helped Romans understand themselves and their place in the world. The international impact of the gladiatorial system extended throughout the empire and beyond its borders. Foreign peoples who witnessed Roman games understood that they were observing demonstrations of imperial power and cultural sophistication that established Rome's claim to universal dominion. The skills that trainers developed in managing and presenting human combat were exported to amphitheaters across the empire, spreading Roman values and imperial ideology to the furthest reaches of the known world. Feel your breathing becoming even more peaceful as we consider the technological innovations that gladiatorial training produced. The development of specialized weapons, protective equipment, and combat techniques required constant experimentation and refinement that advanced metallurgy, engineering, and medical knowledge. The trainers who worked with gladiators were thus contributing to scientific progress, even as they prepared men for death, developing innovations that would benefit Roman society for generations after the arena had claimed its immediate victims. The gladiatorial system also served important functions in Roman legal and judicial processes. The arena provided a means of executing condemned criminals that transformed punishment into entertainment, allowing the state to demonstrate its power while satisfying popular demand for spectacle. The trainers who prepared condemned prisoners for their final performances were thus serving as agents of Roman justice, ensuring that legal sentences were carried out in ways that reinforced rather than undermined public support for imperial authority. As we near the end of our exploration, let your body settle into complete comfort, while reflecting on how the individual suffering we have witnessed was embedded within vast institutional structures that shaped the lives of millions. The trainers whose stories we have followed were both victims and perpetrators of a system larger than any individual could comprehend or control, men and women who found themselves serving purposes they had never chosen, while struggling to maintain their humanity within circumstances that seemed designed to destroy it. Their work made possible an empire that brought unprecedented peace, prosperity, and cultural achievement to much of the ancient world. Yet it did so through methods that required the systematic sacrifice of thousands of human lives for the entertainment of millions. In examining their stories, we glimpse the terrible complexity of historical progress, the ways in which human advancement has often demanded human sacrifice, and the moral courage required of those who serve systems they cannot entirely approve but cannot effectively escape. As you rest in the gentle embrace of comfort and allow your mind to drift through the peaceful waters of approaching sleep, let us gather the threads of wisdom that emerge from these ancient Roman stories and discover how they illuminate truths about the human condition that transcend the boundaries of time, culture, and circumstance. The gladiator trainers whose lives we have explored lived in a world vastly different from our own, yet their struggles with moral complexity, professional duty, and personal meaning echo through the centuries to speak directly to our modern hearts. Feel your breathing naturally deepen as we recognize how each of our trainers faced the fundamental human challenge of finding purpose and maintaining dignity within circumstances beyond their control. Gaius Brutidius discovered that his military training, which had prepared him to preserve life, could also serve to help men face death with honor. His journey teaches us that skills and experiences we believe define us can be transformed and redirected in ways we never anticipated, and that meaning can be found even in the most challenging transitions if we remain open to unexpected forms of service. Allow your muscles to release all remaining tension as we consider the universal lesson embedded in Marcus Flavius Aurelius's story. His rise from slavery to wealth and influence came at the cost of becoming complicit in a system that perpetuated the very oppression he had escaped. His experience reminds us that success achieved through morally questionable means often brings a form of spiritual poverty that no amount of material prosperity can remedy. Yet Marcus also showed us how individuals can work within flawed systems to create small islands of mercy and compassion, proving that even limited moral agency is better than complete abdication of responsibility. Let your eyelids grow heavier as we reflect on the profound truth revealed through Lucius Valerius Maximus and his specialization in teaching the art of dying well. His unusual calling demonstrates that there are forms of expertise and service that society desperately needs, but rarely acknowledges or rewards. In our modern world, we encounter similar figures: hospice workers, grief counselors, emergency responders, who possess knowledge about suffering and mortality that most of us prefer to ignore. Lucius reminds us to honour those who serve in the darkest corners of human experience, bringing dignity and comfort to situations where others see only hopelessness. The story of Titus Flavianus speaks to our contemporary understanding of resilience and rehabilitation. His work with broken gladiators who had lost their fighting identities parallels the modern challenges faced by veterans returning from combat, athletes whose careers end in injury, or professionals whose industries become obsolete. Titus showed us that identity reconstruction is possible even after the most devastating losses, but it requires patience, compassion, and the willingness to help others discover new meanings for their lives when the old meanings have been stripped away. Feel yourself drifting deeper into tranquil relaxation as we consider what Quintus Didius Falco's political manoeuvring teaches us about the nature of institutional corruption and individual complicity. His ability to navigate the gap between public rhetoric and private reality reflects a challenge that remains painfully relevant in our own time. How do we maintain personal integrity while participating in systems that require us to use euphemistic language to disguise morally problematic activities? Quintus reminds us that institutional evil rarely presents itself obviously, but instead emerges through the accumulation of small compromises and convenient rationalizations. Perhaps the most challenging lesson comes from Claudia Secunda, whose work as the Bone Mother forces us to confront the reality that every society depends upon essential labour that it prefers to keep invisible. Her isolation and degradation in service to tasks that everyone needed but no one acknowledged reflects the modern plight of countless workers whose contributions remain unrecognised. The people who clean up after disasters, who process our waste, who handle the unpleasant necessities that allow the rest of us to maintain our comfortable illusions about the nature of civilized life. Allow your breathing to become even more peaceful as we recognise how these ancient stories illuminate the timeless tension between individual conscience and social pressure. Each of our trainers faced moments when they had to choose between personal moral comfort and professional survival, between the dictates of their private ethics and the demands of their public roles. Their varied responses, some finding ways to subvert the system from within, others learning to compartmentalize their moral concerns, still others discovering unexpected forms of meaning in seemingly meaningless work, remind us that there are no easy answers to such dilemmas, only the ongoing challenge of trying to preserve our humanity while meeting our responsibilities. The gladiatorial world also teaches us about the relationship between entertainment and moral responsibility. Roman audiences convinced themselves that watching men die for sport served legitimate religious, political, and cultural purposes, much as modern consumers often rationalize their participation in systems that exploit workers, damage the environment, or perpetuate inequality. The trainers who serve this entertainment industry remind us that every form of spectacle depends upon the hidden labour of those who make it possible, and that our enjoyment of any performance carries moral weight that we ignore at our own spiritual peril. Let your mind settle into profound calm as we consider how these stories reveal the universal human capacity for adaptation and survival in extreme circumstances. Each trainer found ways to preserve essential aspects of their humanity while serving a system that seemed designed to destroy such preservation. Their resilience demonstrates that human beings possess remarkable abilities to create meaning, maintain relationships, and exercise moral agency even in the most constraining circumstances, though always at significant personal cost. The theme of mentorship and legacy runs through all our trainers' stories, reminding us of the profound responsibility we bear when we shape the lives of others. Whether teaching combat skills, business practices, or psychological coping mechanisms, each trainer influenced countless individuals whose own stories branched out to affect others in turn. Their experiences teach us that our impact on the world extends far beyond our direct actions to include all the ways we influence those who learn from us, serve with us, or simply observe our choices. Feel your body naturally preparing for sleep as we recognize the most fundamental lesson these ancient lives offer, that moral complexity is the normal condition of human existence, and that simple judgments about right and wrong rarely capture the full reality of lived experience. The gladiator trainers inhabited a world where good people served evil systems, where necessary skills enabled terrible outcomes, and where personal virtue and institutional corruption existed in uncomfortable proximity. Their stories remind us that moral courage often manifests not through dramatic gestures of rebellion, but through the daily choice to preserve our essential humanity while meeting our unavoidable obligations. They teach us to extend compassion to those who serve in compromised positions, to recognize the hidden costs of the systems we benefit from, and to appreciate the complex moral calculus that ordinary people must navigate in extraordinary circumstances. As sleep begins to claim your consciousness, carry with you the knowledge that these ancient Roman trainers, despite the vast gulf of time and culture that separates us from them, faced moral challenges that remained fundamentally unchanged. Their struggles with duty and conscience, their search for meaning in difficult circumstances, and their efforts to maintain human connection in dehumanizing situations speak directly to our contemporary condition and remind us that the human heart has always sought the same things: purpose, dignity, and the opportunity to serve something greater than ourselves, even when the nature of that service remains forever complicated by the imperfect world in which we must perform it. As the final shadows of our ancient Roman journey settle around you like a soft blanket, and your body finds its deepest state of comfort and relaxation, let us bring our exploration of these remarkable lives to a gentle close. The gladiator trainers whose stories we have shared tonight continue their eternal rest beneath Italian soil that has long since forgotten the thunder of crowds and the clash of weapons, yet their experiences echo still in the quiet wisdom they offer to those who take time to listen to their whispered lessons across the centuries. Feel your breathing naturally slow to its most peaceful rhythm as we take one last walk through the corridors of the great ludus, now empty and silent in our imagination. The training posts stand unmarked by practice swords, the equipment racks hold only shadows, and the sand of the practice arena has been smoothed by winds that carry no scent of blood or sweat. In this tranquil emptiness, we can almost hear the ghosts of old conversations. Gaius Brutidius discussing sword techniques with a nervous recruit, Marcus Flavius Aurelius reviewing financial ledgers by lamplight, Lucius Valerius Maximus offering quiet comfort to a dying warrior. Allow your muscles to release any final traces of tension as you imagine these men at peace at last, freed from the impossible choices and moral burdens that defined their earthly service. In whatever realm awaits beyond the veil of mortality, perhaps they have found the clarity and purpose that eluded them in life. Perhaps they understand now how their individual struggles contributed to the vast tapestry of human experience, how their efforts to preserve dignity and compassion within brutal circumstances added threads of light to an often dark weave. The lessons they offer us as we prepare for sleep are not complex philosophical treatises, but simple human truths learned through hard experience. They remind us that every profession, no matter how difficult or morally ambiguous, can be performed with honour if we maintain our essential humanity. They teach us that meaning can be found in the most unlikely places when we remain open to unexpected forms of service. They show us that even within systems we cannot control or escape, we retain the power to choose kindness over cruelty, mercy over mercilessness, understanding over judgment. Let your eyelids naturally close as you reflect on how these ancient Roman trainers found ways to care for others, despite working within an institution designed to profit from suffering. Gaius discovered that his military skills could serve not just the art of killing, but the art of dying with honour. Marcus learned to use his business position to create small sanctuaries of mercy within a commercial enterprise built on human sacrifice. Lucius transformed his intimate knowledge of death into a form of spiritual service that brought comfort to the dying. Titus developed techniques for psychological healing that helped broken men rebuild their identities from the fragments of their former selves. Feel your mind growing peaceful and quiet as you consider how their stories speak to anyone who has ever felt trapped between conscience and necessity, between personal values and professional demands. Their experiences offer no easy solutions to such dilemmas, but rather the reassurance that we are not alone in facing them, that human beings have always struggled with the challenge of maintaining moral integrity while meeting practical obligations, that the tension between individual conscience and social pressure is as old as civilization itself. The gentle rhythm of your heartbeat can now carry you deeper into the approaching embrace of sleep, as you remember that these trainers, despite their involvement in Rome's brutal entertainment industry, never lost their fundamental capacity for human connection. They formed friendships with colleagues, felt genuine affection for their students, experienced grief at the deaths of those they had trained, Their ability to preserve such emotions within dehumanizing circumstances demonstrates the remarkable resilience of the human spirit and its refusal to be entirely crushed, even by the most challenging conditions. As consciousness begins its slow fade into dreams, let yourself be comforted by the knowledge that the gladiator trainers found ways to honor the memory of those they had prepared for death. Gaius kept careful records of every student who fell in the arena, ensuring that their names and stories would not be entirely forgotten. Marcus established funds to care for families left behind by fallen gladiators, transforming his profits into practical compassion. Lucius developed rituals and prayers that helped ease the transition from life to death, bringing spiritual comfort to those facing their final moments. Titus created a bridge that allowed broken fighters to cross from their old identities to new ones, proving that even the most devastating losses need not mean the end of meaningful existence. Allow yourself to drift ever deeper into the warm darkness of approaching sleep as you imagine these trainers finally laying down their burdens, setting aside their weapons and ledgers and tools, walking slowly away from the world of sand and blood toward whatever peace awaits those who served as best they could within impossible circumstances. Their footsteps fade into silence. Their voices merge with the whisper of ancient winds. Their stories become part of the vast library of human experience that speaks to us across time about the eternal struggles and victories of the human heart. In your dreams tonight, you might find yourself walking through moonlit Roman streets, where the sounds of the arena have fallen silent and the great amphitheaters stand empty under starlight. You might encounter the spirits of gladiator trainers going about their eternal rest, no longer burdened by the weight of preparing men for death, no longer torn between profit and compassion, no longer forced to choose between survival and moral purity. In this dream realm, they have found the peace that eluded them in life, the understanding that their service, however flawed and compromised, added something essential to the human story. Rest now in the gentle assurance that your own struggles with moral complexity and difficult choices place you in a tradition as old as humanity itself, that your efforts to maintain kindness and integrity within challenging circumstances honor the memory of countless others who faced similar trials, that your search for meaning and purpose continues a conversation that began with the first human beings who looked up at the stars and wondered about their place in the vast scheme of existence. Sleep peacefully, knowing that the gladiator trainers of ancient Rome, despite all their burdens and compromises, found ways to preserve the light of human dignity within the darkness of institutional brutality. Their legacy lives not in the spectacular deaths they enabled, but in the quiet moments of compassion they offered, the small mercies they granted, the human connections they maintained against all odds. May your dreams be filled with the gentle wisdom of those who served in the shadows, who found honor in dishonored professions, who kept their hearts open despite being surrounded by cruelty. May you rest in the knowledge that their stories, like all human stories, ultimately speak not of defeat, but of the unconquerable spirit that finds ways to love, to hope, and to serve even in the most challenging circumstances. Good night, dear listener. May you sleep deeply and peacefully, carried into dreams by the ancient voices of those who remind us that every human life, no matter how constrained by circumstances, retains the power to choose compassion over indifference, understanding over judgment, and love over fear. The gladiator trainers of Rome have shared their wisdom across the centuries. Now let their hard-won knowledge of human resilience and dignity accompany you into the gentle realm of restorative sleep. In the deepest hours of night, when your breathing has found its most gentle rhythm and your consciousness drifts like a leaf on peaceful waters, there exists a place beyond the boundaries of waking memory where the ancient gladiator trainers gather still. It is neither the Rome of marble and blood that they knew in life, nor the heaven promised by priests, but something altogether more mysterious, a timeless arena where the lessons of mortality are transformed into the wisdom of eternity. Allow yourself to float deeper into this realm of dreams and visions, where Gaius Brutidius stands no longer as a scarred veteran burdened by impossible choices, but as a teacher whose students never die, whose lessons in courage and honor echo through generations unborn. His weathered hands, freed from the weight of training weapons, now gesture gracefully as he speaks to an audience of souls who understand that true victory lies not in survival, but in how one chooses to face the inevitable. Feel your body settling into its most profound state of rest as you glimpse Marcus Flavius Aurelius in this eternal space, no longer counting coins stained with blood, but keeping ledgers of kindness, recording acts of mercy that ripple through time like stones cast into still water. The business acumen that once served Rome's appetite for death now calculates the compound interest of compassion, showing how a single moment of human decency multiplies across centuries to touch lives that will never know its source. In this peaceful dimension beyond the reach of earthly pain, Lucius Valerius Maximus has become what he always was in truth, a guide for souls in transition, but now helping spirits cross not from life to death, but from suffering to understanding, from the partial vision of mortal existence to the complete clarity that comes when all stories are finally told and all purposes revealed. His whispered words of comfort continue their work, but now they heal wounds that no earthly medicine could touch. Let your breathing grow even more gentle as you sense Titus Flavianus in this eternal workshop, still mending what has been broken, but now repairing not just damaged gladiators, but the torn fabric of history itself, showing how individual acts of healing contribute to the slow redemption of all human experience. His patient work with broken identities has expanded to encompass the restoration of hope itself, proving that nothing is ever truly lost if someone remembers its value. The figure of Quintus Didius Falco moves through this timeless space as well, his political skills now employed in the service of truth rather than expedience, his talent for negotiation helping souls understand the complex bargains that life demanded of them, and the unexpected grace that emerged from their efforts to maintain integrity within corrupt systems. The euphemisms that once disguised brutality have become poetry that reveals hidden beauty in the most unlikely places. Even Claudia Secunda finds her place in this eternal gathering, no longer the bone mother who disposed of the inconvenient dead but the guardian of forgotten lives, ensuring that every soul who passed through the arena's violence is remembered and honoured, that no death was meaningless, even when it seemed to serve only entertainment. Her work with the discarded and the anonymous has revealed the profound truth that every life contains infinite value, regardless of how society chooses to measure its worth. Feel yourself drifting deeper into this vision, where time moves differently, where the accumulated wisdom of all their earthly struggles has crystallized into pure understanding. Here the gladiator trainers see clearly how their individual choices, however constrained by circumstances, contributed to the vast evolution of human consciousness, how their efforts to preserve dignity within degrading systems helped humanity slowly learn to value compassion over cruelty, mercy over vengeance. In this eternal arena, the gladiators they trained in life appear not as victims of entertainment, but as teachers whose sacrifices illuminated truths about courage, honour, and the preciousness of life that could be learned in no other way. The sand beneath their feet is not stained with blood, but glows with the light of every brave choice ever made. Every moment when someone chose to die well rather than live badly. Every instant when fear was overcome by love. Allow your consciousness to rest completely in this timeless space, where all the moral complexity we have explored resolves into perfect clarity. The trainers understand now that their service to Rome's brutal entertainment was also, unknowingly, service to humanity's gradual awakening to its own capacity for both terrible cruelty and transcendent compassion. Their stories become parables that will be told and retold wherever human beings struggle to find meaning in difficult circumstances. As you surrender completely to sleep's gentle embrace, carry with you this final vision of the gladiator trainers in their eternal peace, surrounded by all those they helped to live and die with dignity, witnessing the fruit of their labours in every act of kindness performed by souls they never met, but somehow touched across the barriers of time and space. Their arena has become a temple where the human spirit celebrates its own indestructible nature, its ability to find light in the deepest darkness and create meaning from the most meaningless suffering. Rest now in the knowledge that their stories continue beyond the ending we have shared, that every time someone chooses compassion over indifference, every time someone finds ways to serve others within imperfect systems, every time someone maintains their humanity despite dehumanizing circumstances, the gladiator trainers of ancient Rome add their voices to a chorus of approval that spans the ages. Sleep deeply, knowing that in the eternal arena of human experience, We are all both trainers and gladiators, teachers and students, witnesses and participants in the endless drama of souls learning to love despite the cost, learning to hope despite the odds, learning to serve despite the pain. The gladiator trainers have shown us the way. Now it is our turn to carry their wisdom forward into whatever arena awaits us in the morning light. Good night, gentle soul. May your dreams be filled with the eternal peace that awaits all who serve with honour, and may you wake refreshed, carrying within your heart the timeless truth that even the darkest chapters of human history contain seeds of light that will bloom forever in the gardens of eternity. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.